Hello, welcome to Oceanic Oracle. My name is Ari and today I'm going to be I'm going to be filming my April wrap-up. Well, this is exciting. Can't believe, this is the last week of April. Oh my god, I can't believe April's almost over. It's ridiculous. It feels like this month has gone by really quickly and I don't know why. And one thing I have been able to do this month that I haven't been able to do in a while is I've read 16 books. I'm so happy, I'm so proud of myself. As we all know, I play cards every month to choose my books. So I draw cards like this and they have prompts on them. And I just restarted my game. So this is like the start of a new round, I guess, which is quite cool. So I'm going to be talking about the books that I read for each of these cards, and I also took part in the Magical Readathon. So if these books related to certain things with Magical Readathon, most of them do. I will also talk about them, well, I'll talk about what they were for my classes for the Magical Readathon. So I guess we should get started. The first book that I read in April was, I guess to no one's surprise, On the Way to the Wedding. This is the last book in the Bridgerton series. I was rereading them at the end of last month. So I read An Offer from a Gentleman, I read Colin's book, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, and then I just skipped a few books to end up with Greg's. I have read Hyacinth's book, It's in His Kiss. I read it in January, so I've just been revisiting the books that I like. I really love Gregory's book. Anyway, so this book was for If Music Be the Food of Love card, and this card was to read any romance. Definitely achieved that. I love this cover. I don't know, I'm really feeling the pinks. Aside from being for my card, this book was for the prompt, Animal Studies, Ways of Pegasus, to read a quick read. I go through these really quickly. I think I read this on the first day of April for first and second day combined, because I usually start them at night and then I finish them in the morning. So I did that. I love the series. I'll give you a brief description of what it is. If you can tell, it's a Bridgerton book. It's a historical romance. It's medium paced. I really enjoyed this book because it focuses on Gregory. Throughout the series, because when you start the series, Gregory is like 12, I think, in the first book, in The Duke and I. So he has matured over the time, and I think when you read this book, he is 24. He believes in true love and love at first sight. He knows love at first sight exists because Benedict, his older brother, experienced love at first sight. And Gregory wants to find his one true love and get married. Gregory's really sweet. I have a soft spot for Gregory and Hyacinth because they are both they're both fantastic characters, and obviously you watch them grow up and it's so nice to read about them and what they're actually feeling as opposed to what the characters just think they mean. It's so good. I'm a huge fan of Greg's character. I love his belief in love, and I love how steadfast he is in its existence. But there are times in this book where I'm like, I want to shake him, because this book features I guess it's like a scheming friend, like a friend trying to convince her best friend to marry Greg, and then somewhere along the way she ends up falling in love with him and he ends up liking her. But it's really frustrating. When Greg is doing stuff, I'll be like, Greg, acknowledge Lucy, Lucy's right there. Lucy's right there, and all this stuff applies to her, and oh. Lucy is also a great character. So Lucy is the female love interest in this, and she just has a really kind-hearted personality. As I already said, she initially helps Greg try to win her best friend Hermione over, and the relationship sort of forms based on Greg going to Lucy to try and win Hermione's hand. It's really nice. It's really sweet, and I really enjoy this because it feels like they're actually forming a friendly relationship before Greg like, whoa, he walks into a room and he sees, is like, oh my god, like the one true love has been staring me right in the face. He sees Lucy from behind, and then he realizes, oh shit, I should have been courting her the whole time, but she's practically married. As a reader, I find Julia Quinn's writing really, really good. For me, like, considering the fact that she wrote a series about 8 siblings, she made all these 8 siblings stand out in their own right. I really admire her for that, because obviously siblings can be similar, but they're not the exact same. Like, me and my sisters, we have some similar interests, but we're not carbon copies of each other, thank goodness. That would have been a nightmare for everyone. The thing I really love is the fact that all these, like, all the siblings and their respective love interests stand out in their own ways. I really admire Julia Quinn for being able to do that. This book was light-hearted, but at times it got me, like, it got emotional, and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars, if you can tell. And yeah, let's move on because I've got a lot to talk about. So the next book that I read in April was The Titan's Curse. I am doing my giant reread of Percy Jackson. This is the 3rd book in the series. The series is up there, so you can see it's missing the middle. I read this book for Lightning Strikes Twice, which is to read a mythology retelling. Surprise! Percy Jackson is a mythology retelling. This is the 3rd book in the Percy Jackson series. It is magical realism mixed with mythology, so it's set in our modern day, but with the gods added on top of it. So you have mythology on top of magical realism. It's a really adventurous and light-hearted story. I mean, most of it is light-hearted. There are some bits in here which really, like, made me cry. Like, if you've read The Titan's Curse, you know the scenes I'm probably talking about. It's not fast, it's not slow, it's medium paced, which I really enjoy. So The Titan's Curse, like, always holds a special place in my heart in the series. While I love all the books. While this book mostly misses the character that I would insert myself as, Annabeth, whilst she's not in most of this, I'm not going to say what happens to her, just know that she's not in it for most of it. I love the growth and the depth that Percy as a character is able to go through from this quest itself, and how developed the other characters around him become. So we have Grover returns, but we also are introduced to other characters. At the end of the 2nd book, a demigod who was believed to have died, or who was transformed into a tree, comes back. Thalia Grace, she is the daughter of Zeus. We get to see Percy and Thalia's interactions, which I really like. I really enjoy it because, like, they're cousins. It's nice to see those family relationships, how similar yet different they are. It's absolutely fantastic. There's so much growth that goes on. And Thalia, who is just about to turn 16, makes a really important decision at the end of the book, which changes both hers and Percy's fate forever. Not to mention, you have the introduction of the Hunters of Artemis, who I'm sure if you were a girl and if you liked Greek mythology, I'm sure you were interested in becoming a hunter. I mean, at some point, because boys. But yes, the Hunters of Artemis and Artemis herself are represented. Through this book, the overall story sort of becomes darker, because as we're moving towards the last 2 books in the series, there's a big war coming. So you can sort of feel the shift from the sort of, like, we have to rush and achieve our quest, to sort of like a more darker and somber tone. The antagonists and everything add to that and make the book feel darker. You also get the introduction of Nico D'Angelo and Bianca D'Angelo. The D'Angelos are a fan favourite for a reason. They're fantastic. And I'm not going to spoil anything else. I'm so happy that I'm continuing my reread. I love this book so much, and I can't wait to read The Battle of the Labyrinth, hopefully next month, but we'll see. I gave that 5 stars. The next book that I read this month is actually like a graphic novel, and I'm sure if you've been anywhere online, like on Instagram or on Twitter, you will have known that Heartstopper has just come out. I read Heartstopper for my LGBT plus representation card, so it's to read a book by an LGBTQ plus author and or featuring characters. Do you want a heartwarming story about the LGBTQ plus community and about self-discovery? This book has it. I've read this book before. This was a reread for me before I watched the series, and oh, I love this comic book so much. Like, these characters are so adorable. And I also have just finished my rewatch of of Heartstopper on TV. The story of Nick and Charlie, as well as their friends, so Elle, Tara, Darcy, Tal, it's all so important, and it's one of the best shows, I think, to talk about sexuality as well as gender. The graphic novel series is fantastic. Alice Oseman is she is phenomenal. I really, really love her work. She's one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite graphic novelists. If you haven't read Heartstopper, you need to go and pick it up. So many people can relate to these characters. The characters are just so diverse, and this story is just so beautiful. Through this story, we follow Charlie, who is in year 10. He's just been moved to a new form group for reception, so to take attendance, I guess, for the American audience. And when he moves rooms, he's assigned a seat next to Nick Nelson, who is year 11. So they have to sit next to each other, and this whole story starts with them meeting each other. Charlie was outed last year. It's really sad that sort of stuff still goes on. Being outed without your permission is awful. Charlie experienced lots of bullying in year 9. The two of them start to form a friendship. So Nick one day ends up with his hands covered in blue ink from his fountain pen, managed to explode all over his hands and his top and everything. And that's when they first start to really talk in the comics, after this ink explosion. And as their relationship moves on, it's all about how Nick actually starts to notice that he might actually feel something for Charlie. And he's never experienced that before. He's never experienced feeling something for a guy. So he starts to question himself and his sexuality. It's a story about them. It's a journey for Nick's self-discovery, and I'm so happy that we can have a happy story about self-discovery. It's so nice to have something become popular that's not about sadness, that's about happiness and acceptance and learning to love yourself, as well as discovering new things about you. It's fantastic. Go out and read Heartstopper. It's lovely. And if you haven't read it, definitely check it out. No surprise, I gave this one 5 stars too. The next book that I read was Velocities. This is a Greek play, and I read it for my non-fiction card. It's technically non-fiction. I did read the introduction and everything, so I do have more of a backstory as to what goes on. I read Velocities for my elemental studies prompt, and in elemental studies we're studying the dynamics of air, and it was to read a book under 100 pages. This book is under 100 pages. On Goodreads it's 78, in this book it's 98, so I included the introduction in that. This is a play about Velocities. You have Odysseus is in this play, so if you know Odysseus, the Odyssey. So you also have Achilles' son in here as well. And this is actually a play about Odysseus and Neoptolemus trying to steal Philocrates' bow, the bow that was given to him from Heracles, or Hercules if you're using the Roman form. This play starts off with Odysseus and Neoptolemus coming up with a plan to steal this bow from this injured man. Philocrates has been left. He was abandoned on the Isle of Lemnos on the way to Troy. So Odysseus actually made the executive decision to abandon him on this island because Philocrates got bitten by a poisonous snake, and Philocrates has just been living on this island ever since. His leg has become really badly crippled, and he's slowly dying as the venom is moving into his body, which is an interesting choice to say the least. I'm assuming it's more infected than venomous, because if the snake was venomous, he would die in a few hours. Philocrates is in a cave, and Odysseus sends Neoptolemus up to this cave because he thinks that Philocrates will refuse to help if Odysseus asks him directly. He's right. Philocrates hates Odysseus's guts. Neoptolemus starts to form a friendly relationship with Philocrates, only to have Philocrates discover that, oh, he was just using me the whole time. It's a play about betrayal. It's a tragic Greek play. Obviously Odysseus makes it out alive because he ends up going on his Odyssey. It's really interesting to see a character that's like a hero to so many people in the light that he probably was. Like, I think one of the things that gets glamorized with the Odyssey in particular is Odysseus's character. You have to really read into it because Odysseus has lots of flaws, like his arrogance. He is so arrogant and he just believes everything that he comes up with will work. Definitely not. Case in point in this. He's super unlikable, but I think that's the point. I really enjoyed this play. This play is one of 3 that were written at the time about Philocrates, and people say this is the best. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. I will say that it is quite dark and tense, so just be aware of that, and it's very slow. The next book that I read in April was First Comes Scandal. So this is the 4th book in the Rokesby Boys quartet. And I read this book for my Far Away Place card, which is to read a book set in a different country. Not very hard for me to do. Most of the books that I own take place in other countries. I think I've read a few books outside of Hong Kong history books that take place in Hong Kong. If you're interested, maybe I'll talk about those. Anyway, so Faraway Place, this works because this is set in England. It's set in Kent, actually. For the Magical Readathon, I read this book for my restoration subject. We were studying curing wounds in restoration, and the prompt for it was to read a book featuring a doctor. Our main male character in this book is a doctor. His name is Nicholas Rokesby. He's the 4th and final Rokesby brother who is unmarried. It's interesting going back because when I first read this book, I think I was looking through like a 5-star lens. Going back to it, I have now reduced it down to 4 stars because I think whilst I enjoyed it, I was like, I don't think it's 5 stars. It's not 5 stars, it's 4 stars. It's always good to go and reread your books and alter your ratings with time. So this book is historical romance. I'm in a romance mood this month. This book is very funny, it's very light-hearted, and it's quite slow paced, which I liked. I'm always a fan of a good slow burn. Slow burn is like one of my favorite things. If you want a book with banter, like really well written banter, Julia Quinn does not disappoint. This book has it. Our 2 main characters actually get married in a marriage of convenience thing because our main leading lady, Georgiana, she gets involved in a scandal, not her doing. Georgiana had no say in anything. If she didn't marry the guy who compromised her, she would get ruined. She thought she had 2 options. Either marry the man who compromised her, who kidnapped her in a carriage and took her away for 1 hour, or live life as a spinster and be shamed by society. But the Rokesbys come in clutch. Lord Manston is Georgiana's godfather, and he calls his youngest son back from Edinburgh, Nicholas, and Nicholas is studying medicine. He's studying to become a physician / a doctor. He takes 2 weeks to get down to Kent from Edinburgh. He basically gets told he's asked Georgiana to marry you, and so the story begins there. It's really fun. I'm such a fan of banter. Like I really enjoy romances where there is banter. While this series isn't as steamy as, say, the Bridgertons, even the Bridgerton books, they only have 1 or 2 smut scenes, I guess. These books are not as smutty. They're like, most of the time, it isn't about that. It's more about the Regency, like gentle caresses or like dances and that sort of thing. This doesn't really have that because it's marriage of convenience, which is a fun trope. I really do like that trope. While it's marriage of convenience, it's also about Georgiana and Nicholas like going from friends to lovers, and it's about their growth. You also see the first 3 Bridgerton children in this book. So we talk about Edward and Violet. You actually see you meet a child, Anthony, Benedict, and a baby Colin. So very cute, very cute. The settings in this book was really nice because while most of it takes place in either Kent or Edinburgh, you actually get to go along with them on the whole journey as a married couple back up to Edinburgh, and you see how they adapt to life as a married couple, and I just think it's really sweet. Definitely not 5 stars, but it was really enjoyable for me, just in the mood for romance, so there we go. Alright, so the next book that I read is Asterix and the Griffin. I originally had the Witcher book down for this area, but I had to DNF it. I just wasn't intrigued, so I'm going to be unhauling that book soon in an unhaul. I'm not going to talk. I just didn't like The Witcher, so I swapped it for Asterix and the Griffin. This is the latest release in the Asterix the Ghoul series. It's a graphic novel. Asterix and the Griffin was the book I read for the Wild Outdoors, which was to read a book that takes place primarily outside. This does that. And this book was also for my shapeshifting class. In shapeshifting, our focus for the spring term was on formation claws, was to read a book with an animal with claws on the cover. I mean, you can see in the title the griffin has claws, but also there's a dog on here. Dogs have claws. This is the latest iteration of the Asterix the Ghoul series. Asterix the Ghoul was a series that I read when I was quite young, so I do have nostalgia related to like these characters, but the authors have changed now and I can really tell the difference. So if you don't know what Asterix the Gaul is about, the Gauls were the people who live in France. The whole series is based off the premise that the Roman Empire has invaded everywhere in Gaul, but this one village on like the tip is still rebelling with the help of a druid who brews magic potion that makes them all super strong and able to beat up these Roman legions, and Caesar's not very happy about it. The story doesn't take place in Gaul. This series actually is about Asterix and Obelix going to somewhere in Eastern Europe, and the reason they're there, they've been summoned by Getafix, who is the local druid of their village. Getafix has got a vision from the shaman who's there. He's called a shaman. He's not given a name. It's not great. While this is happening, whilst Asterix is going there, Caesar has been approached by a cartographer who is looking to expand Rome's reputation, I should say. He goes to Caesar and says, oh, we should go and find the Griffin because this is on a vase and we need to build up more mythical prowess, basically. And Caesar agrees. They kidnapped an Amazon who can tell them where it is. It's all very messy. Basically what ends up happening is that the shaman who was summoning Getafix, because I was told to summon you from my drums. My drums told me I had to summon you because something bad is going to happen. Basically what ends up happening is the shaman gets taken to try and lead the Romans to the place where the Griffin exists. I don't know what the author was trying to go for. It made me feel really uncomfortable. The story is supposed to feature really strong warrior women, you know, like Amazons. But the women of this village basically couldn't do anything if it weren't for an outsider, Asterix and Obelix, coming in and saving them, which really messed with my head. You're saying that these women are super strong and like don't give a shit about men, because that's what the Amazons did. They didn't give a shit about men. You're telling me that they couldn't do anything. They didn't have any good plans without Asterix. How dumb is that? This is overdone. This is overplayed. I'm sick of this trope. It annoyed me to no end. I didn't really enjoy it as much. I found it misogynistic, and I don't think I'm going to be picking up anything by the two newest authors again. So goodbye. The next book that I read in April was Of Song and Tide, and I read this book for my Everyday Magic card, which is to read a book that takes place in the real world. For the Magical Readathon, I read this for my Conjuration class, and our focus for the spring was a Conjuring of Light, and the prompt for it was to read a book with a light source on the cover. As you can see, there are jellyfish on the cover. I chose bioluminescence as my form of light. This book frustrated me. Like, I've had some really good reads this month, but these books, like these past few books, have really frustrated me, because for this book in particular, it had everything that I thought I would love. Like, I love mermaids and I love stories about mermaids, albeit British mermaids, Irish mermaids, African mermaids, everything. I love reading about mermaids, but this missed the mark. I think it all stemmed down to the main female protagonist. I think that was the main thing it stemmed down to. I was really looking forward to reading about Gaelic mer people. I will say one thing: the research about Irish history and about Irish folklore was fantastic. This author like pulled it out of the park. I can tell that like they went and they researched so well. But the whole thing broke down because I didn't like the main character. I didn't like the main female character. I really want men to learn how to write well-rounded female characters, because so much of the time the female character gets used as a plot device. And the funny thing was that the main character, which the story's supposed to act around, just became that plot device. It really, really annoyed me. I understand when it's the start of a series, the main character gets told a lot of stuff. Things just happen to her as opposed to her impacting other things. One of the first things that happens in this book is our main female character, her parents die. I know grief affects people differently, but I felt like she didn't grieve them at all. Like, as soon as she met a boy, the hole in her heart healed, you know? It didn't work for me. Like, I really loved the setting. I liked the other characters. I liked the idea of the story. I got so frustrated about the main character. I had to remove myself. I had to stop reading, and I was just like, I need to take a step back. I need to stop because I'm getting angry. I'm gonna throw my Kindle across the room. That shouldn't happen. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I pushed myself through it. I was originally going to stop halfway, but I was like, I'm just gonna keep going. It had everything that was supposed to be like. It had romance in it, it had mythology, it was supposed to be adventurous, it was supposed to be emotional. It just didn't work. It didn't work, and I'm just annoyed at myself. So there we go, 3 stars, moving on. So the next few books are books that I didn't draw cards for, but they still have stuff that relates to the Magical Readathon. So I took a few quests for the Magical Readathon. You can do quests to add books to your TBR if you're comfortable with it. And I've added quite a few. The quest that I responded to was Fire Weasel in Danger, and it was to read a book by a new author. When I was drawing my cards at the beginning of the month, I managed to forget that I needed to read a 12 books for 12 months book. And so I was like, oh, I need to go and do that. So I picked up This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. This book was recommended to me by my sister. Like, she's a physiotherapist in the NHS, and this was a good way to like let me see what the medical staff actually experience in the NHS. If you're not sure what the NHS is, it's the National Health Service in the United Kingdom. So healthcare is free to everyone. We live in a world that's been plagued by a pandemic for the past 2 years. And reading a book about the medical profession is really, it's really important, because whilst this book took place in a time that wasn't about COVID, the issues that were brought up and highlighted in this book can still be found in present day. This book is supposed to be humorous, but it's also like a real life story. It's a memoir. So these are actually diary entries from a junior doctor, because in the NHS, the stuff that happens in here, particularly issues regarding payment for the hours that are worked, is like significant, and the pressure that's put on these like doctors who are just out of medical school and who suddenly end up on this like ladder through the hospital system. One minute you're there listening and like trying stuff for the first time, and the next you're going and you're performing cesarean sections, then instructing other people on how to do it. And this stuff just illustrated how exhausted medical staff are. Unlike your average worker, if they want time off, they have to find someone else to cover their shift, otherwise they need to work, and they can be called into work at a drop of a hat. They need to go immediately once they get called. It just shows us what's wrong, and what can be improved. I think it was a really good book to read. I'm really glad that I picked this up. I really appreciate doctors and physicians a lot. I think if you're interested in reading about stuff from a real life doctor who does add humor, he doesn't try to make it as gruesome as possible, definitely pick this up. I gave this 4.5 stars. The next book that I read this month was The Other Miss Bridgerton. This is the 3rd book in the Rokesby Quartet. So this is another historical fiction. It's light-hearted, it's quite slow. This follows Poppy Bridgerton, one of the many Bridgerton cousins, and Andrew Rokesby, who is the 3rd son in the Rokesby boys. One day, Poppy's strolling down the Dorset coast. She decides to go adventuring. She sends her maid off and goes adventuring and looks in a cave. Unknown to her, Andrew Rokesby's crew has been called to get some whiskey from said cave. and she ends up catching them in the act, and she basically ends up getting kidnapped and taken aboard Andrew's boat. And it's all about their relationships. Andrew is a gentleman, so he comes from a gentleman's family, and he's actually working for the British government, and he cannot be delayed, hence the reason why Poppy had to be taken. They couldn't release her until the job was done because there was important documents that needed to be transferred to Portugal. The journey from the coast off Dorset to Lisbon in Portugal takes a week on this boat. Throughout that week, you have lots of banter between Andrew and Poppy. Poppy sort of learns more about Andrew. She doesn't know that he is a gentleman. She doesn't know that he's actually quite important. She doesn't know who he actually is because he doesn't tell her his actual last name. If you've got to keep a secret identity, keep it. She's not very comfortable at the first bit, and like slowly she starts to like understand Andrew more. I think you do get a bit of Stockholm syndrome in here as well. Again, it's not very smutty. If you want a pirate romance, this is like a pirate romance. So you have sharing the same cabin, forced proximity, all that sort of thing. Whilst I can acknowledge that like this rings of Stockholm syndrome, it doesn't stop me from liking it. I really enjoy the way that the romance was actually set up because it's more of a battle of the minds as opposed to like just physical attraction. Poppy is a very curious individual, and Andrew is also like, he likes to outsmart people, but Poppy is also used to being like the smartest person in the room. So it's always nice when they actually clash. They have nice banter. Keep in mind, this is slow burn. I liked it, and I think if you're looking for a pirate romance with forced proximity, definitely check this out. The next book that I read in April was Because Miss Bridgerton. This is the first book in the Rokesby Boys quartet. I mean, as you can see, I've just been going through and reading all of them. So this book follows Billy Bridgerton. Billy Bridgerton has grown up with the Rokesby siblings, so Edward, Andrew and Mary, and this book follows Billy, I guess, just at her stage in life. Billy is 23, she hasn't had a season in London, she hasn't been presented to the Queen, and she's perfectly happy just living in Aubrey Hall, managing her father's estate. Our main male character in this book is George Rokesby. He is the heir of the Rokesby land. Billy basically grew up being her father's heir until her father actually had a son, Edward, who is the father of the main Bridgerton family that we know. I really like this because Billy is very headstrong. I think it's nice to read about women who are doing farm work. Like Billy was basically in charge of monitoring the crops and like the farmers and all the villagers that were a part of Aubrey Hall, all the tenants and everything. I really enjoyed reading about that. George is also like a really interesting character. One of the main things about this book is actually it's a dislike to like book, I guess. So the main characters hate each other at the beginning. It's hate to love. They hate each other at the beginning. Slowly but surely they like each other. They like each other at the end, and it's all about them seeing a new side to each other, and I think that's really beautiful. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It was just fun. I really enjoyed George's character because George is like, as the eldest male child, he is not allowed to go and like fight for his country, being a part of the army, and he feels like he sort of can't do anything. There's lots of stuff outside of just their relationship that they go through. There's lots of inner turmoil. There is a smut scene in here and it's not at the end. So while this is sort of slow burn, it's not completely slow burn. It's more slow, medium paced. It's light-hearted. It's fun. What's not to like? Julia Quinn is fun. And finally, the last book in the Rokesby Boy quartet is The Girl with Make-Believe Husband. I filmed a video of me creating my journal spread for it. This is the second book in the Rokesby Boys series, and this follows Cecilia and Edward. Cecilia has journeyed across the Atlantic to America in search of her brother, who was reported to have been injured. Cecilia goes looking for her brother and ends up finding Edward Rokesby instead. Word has been sent back to his family that Edward has been missing, but evidently he's been found. He is in hospital and he is in a coma. Cecilia, initially she goes in to try and offer her services for healing, but she's told that no one can go near Edward unless they're his family. Only Edward's family can go near him. So in front of all the officers, she declares that she is his wife, but she really isn't his wife. Edward wakes up from his coma with amnesia, so he doesn't remember anything. He got hit in the head really badly. He's lost 4 months worth of memory. This book follows their relationship. Cecilia, she realizes that there are certain things that can be done when she's the wife of a respected captain, as opposed to just being Miss Cecilia Harcourt, that she has a bit more pull. Edward finds out eventually. He does regain his memory back. I don't know if that's a spoiler, but he regains his memory back. I really enjoyed the relationship that these two have. I think they bring out the best in each other. It's a book about a time that I haven't read too much about, like, aside from, like, I've read stuff from the American side, but not really stuff about the British side, and it's interesting. I enjoyed it, and this was just what I needed this month, so I gave that 5 stars. All right, so the next 3 books are all in the same series. I'm just going to talk about them briefly. They're all part of the League of Extraordinary Women series. I read Bringing Down the Duke, which is the first book, A Rogue of One's Own, which is the second book, and Portrait of a Scotsman, which is the third book. These are all by Evie Dunmore. They're fantastic if you want to read about a bit of British history that revolves around the suffragettes and a historical romance featuring women who wanted equality, who were looking to abolish the Marital Property Act, where once the woman was married, she couldn't own any property. It all had to be in her man's name. But you own everything your husband owns. That's not the same as actually having your name on the property list, because in the olden times, I don't know about the voting rules now in the UK, but you had to own property in order to vote in elections, and the suffragettes were trying to abolish the act so women could own property and they could have the right to speak in the House of Lords and stuff. These books are really fun. They're all sort of medium paced. They're quite adventurous, and depending on the book, it can be quite light-hearted. The latest one, Portrait of a Scotsman, is sort of a Hades and Persephone retelling. The main focus isn't just the romance, you're also talking about the political stuff that was going on at the time. All these books are set in the 1880s, so the start of 1880. And it's really interesting. Women have just been allowed into Oxford. They've got their first colleges. It's really intriguing, and I enjoyed them. All these books have got 4 stars. I think Portrait of a Scotsman got 4.5. I really liked them, I enjoyed them, and I'm sure lots of people would. So if you're looking for a historical romance that is a bit different and talks about a bit of history that's a bit later, definitely check out The League of Extraordinary Women. The last book that I read in April was Skin of the Sea. I read this and Portrait of a Scotsman for my 24-hour readathon. I should have the vlog coming up soon if it's not out already. This book is about mermaids, so I do have a good book to recommend if you're looking for a book about mermaids. This book is historical fiction combined with mythology or fantasy. This book follows Selimide, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, who is one of the Mamiwata, who are sort of black mermaids. So Semidele is part of the Mamiwata, and one of her jobs as a mermaid is to take the souls of those who have passed at sea and to send them on to the next life. It's really interesting. I love reading about mythology. I'm a big myth nerd. I love reading about myths that and mythology that I haven't learnt about, and this is fantastic. I think the way that this is written was really cool too, because there's snippets of Semidele's life before she became a member of the Mamiwata, so she was reborn as one. The stuff that goes on in here, so she can actually, once she dries off, so once she's on land she can dry off, she actually gets legs, which is quite cool. I'm not sure if Hans Christian Andersen could do that. I don't think they could, given the fact that The Little Mermaid talks about Ursula giving aerial legs. Anyway, one day Semi finds a boy who has been thrown off a ship, who actually enters the water and he isn't dead, so she actually ends up saving him, and to repay what's gone on, she ends up going on a quest to try to seek the gods and ask for their forgiveness to not take out drastic action on everyone and everything that's on the land. It's really interesting. It's a really cool concept. If you like books about mermaids and you're interested in sort of like something different with West African mythology, this is fantastic. The characters are so like, I love the characters. It's so interesting. As someone who doesn't know too much about it, it's just so cool. It's quite fast paced too. Like I read this book in my 24-hour readathon, as I was saying. It was really quick to go through. The writing's fantastic. I was really intrigued. I was on the edge of my seat waiting to see what would happen next. It has everything that I want. It's got like quests, it's got romance, forbidden romance. It's just so cool. If you like books about mermaids, definitely check out Skin of the Sea. The second book is coming out in September. I know it's coming out in September, so I'm going to be checking that out when it comes out. Can't wait. That is it. That's all the books. Oh my goodness. Those are all the books that I read in April. Oh my goodness. There's a lot of them. So if you're still here, thank you for staying. I hope this was interesting. I hope you enjoyed seeing what was going on. I'm going to end it now. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want more bookish content. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, depending on when you're watching this. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.